usually provocative and often quite twisted. They're also, season after season, some of the most memorable things we see on any catwalk anywhere. And they make you want to know more about the man who made them. So here are the facts. He was born in Glasgow in 1982, the youngest of 5, in a strict Catholic family, which means he grew up with a finely tuned sense of guilt and sin. There's still the spice in his work today. He also fed on art and Walt Disney, fashion, particularly the work of Gianni Versace. So they're the facts. The rest of the story is all about the mystery of creation and my effort to find how the mind of Kane works. One of the things that I've always loved most about your work is that it feels so rooted in things that are deeply personal and maybe even traumatic for you. So the way you're kind of working through things from your childhood, you know, youngest of 5,
that's right.
in a hard part of Glasgow.
I grew up, obviously, it was central Scotland, so it's between Edinburgh and Glasgow, but obviously Glasgow's closest. But a working village. It used to be like a steelworks, so it was closed down in the 80s by Margaret Thatcher. So it used to be like raving, it used to be amazing, and obviously the dark times came when that all happened. But I was really lucky, my dad worked really hard, he had his own businesses. I was the youngest, I was spoiled. I was very creative from a young age. Obviously Tammy was 5 years my senior, so I was seeing what she was doing. She was also very creative.
So how was your creativity expressing itself early on then?
I suppose I learned to draw very early on. I was drawing always nude bodies, always nudity. Teachers complained about me at school because I was always drawing penises and vaginas and boobies. And
how old?
Like primary school. It was one of those things that I was obsessed with. It wasn't because I was some perverted child or demented child. I was just interested in the body, and when you have a teacher that really makes an impression, you never forget those teachers. Mrs. Braun, who was Mrs. Keenan, Jane Braun, she was such a big influence. I loved being a teacher's pet, that was one. But I loved her, and we spoke like adults together, even though I was a teenager, and she taught me so much. She truly believed, if you want to go to Central St Martin's, and you'll get there and you'll do it. So. But I always knew, I always wanted to do this, and even from a young age, obviously having 2 sisters, Tammy and Sandra, who were very creative. Fashion design, I didn't really know what it was, but I was so intrigued by the world of the Versace's or the Lacroix or the Muglers or the Helmut Langs, because TV was such a big outlet for me. Like you're saying, the horror films, like watching all these X-rated films, it just was common in those days. Auntie Sandra was, slapping Nan, but we saw so much from Auntie Sandra. She would babysit us, we'd watch all these rental videos from the van that used to come round. It'd be like 50 pence to get a video for the evening. So that's the sort of things we did as stuff to do. But TV was another outlet for me because it was a window outside of Scotland, which was super shiny and super glamorous.
Another thing that's always very striking about your work is the hard edge, and it feels like that's the kind of thing that you acquire. The appreciation of the edge is the kind of thing you acquire from when you've really had to fight quite hard. So yeah, I wondered if you were bullied or if...
No, I was never bullied, but you always feel not good enough, especially when you went to Central St Martin's. It was so competitive that literally there's always someone better. That pressure pushes you to your best. And then obviously Louise Wilson she always said, yeah, there is always someone better, so you do really need to bust your balls and work your gut out, and there's a lot of crying entailed, but this is the honest truth. I'm going to tell you that if it's shit or good. And she really did, but she also taught me there's no such thing as bad taste, it's just different. And people who think that that's good or bad, then what do they know? It's personally something that's very emotive to you, and yeah, it's just different.
So if you don't close off what you consider to be things in bad taste, you're doubling your possibilities.
There's so many more possibilities out there that you can take advantage of or look into or research into, because everyone else sees it as being ugly or bad.
But Louise was very much like the sink or swim kind of teacher, wasn't she? So that sort of Darwinian thing.
Yes.
The survival of the fittest. There's a kind of speed in what you do. There's a kind of restlessness and an urgency. Did it come from that sense that actually now you're in a race with yourself? You're not racing with other students.
Exactly. I think early on, to please Louise was the pinnacle. And when I did please Louise, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, because you're working in an environment where it is very competitive, but everyone was doing the same sort of thing. Whereas I came into the office and showed Louise a lacy, frilly short dress, and she was like, it's fucking brilliant. And I was like, really? So that made me feel like I don't need to conform, I don't need to do Margiela lookalikes or Com. And I always thought, should I be? But my instinct was telling me differently. And to this day, I always try to completely push, not do what anyone else is doing. Or if I even sniff something that looks like something, it's scrapped. Because I never want to be that person who's taken advantage or seen to be derivative. You can be derivative in good ways, but it never lifts. It always has to be 100% me and Tammy.
And never look like anybody else.
Never look like anyone else. And if it does, then I'll kill myself. But honestly, like it always needs to be 100% Kane. And you can kill yourself doing it, but I think that's the whole process. I think that's the whole point of being creative. It's not about being lazy anymore, especially this day and age. People just want newness, they strive for it. And I think there's just so much of the same that you always have to stand out, and creative always is the pinnacle.
But do you ever have a sense that you've absolutely done what you set out to do, or is it that, do you ever feel satisfied?
I think every time you start a new collection, you always feel as if you have had a lobotomy, because starting from scratch, you're like, how did we do the last one? And then how can we push ourselves further? And it's learning, it's all about learning. I think that's what we're in the process to do, is to learn. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do anything. And if people do say that, then they're obviously not in the right job, because I think being a creative, it's all about making the mistakes and just looking left field. If there was one single way, then the world would be completely one-dimensional, whereas I wanted to be four-dimensional, five-dimensional. And I think the way I was brought up was always to have that outlook.
What's the closest you've ever come to being completely to what? All the time. Now, what's the closest you've ever come to being totally happy with something you've done?
I mean, I think it's backstage before a show, you're literally, that is the highest you can get, because it's over. And seeing those girls lined up, it just completes the whole story. And then I think, honestly, that first dress I did for Louise Wilson, I always look back at those dresses, because I always feel I made them with like £2. I bought the fabrics from the market, and for Louise Wilson to say they're fucking amazing, that was literally a moment that I'll never forget. So that, for me, I always look back to that, because I can't beat it. Can't beat that, because it was so
That
brilliant.
sounds like crack.
Yeah.
You're chasing that high forevermore.
Yeah, I'll always look to those moments.
But I think it's so smart, this thing you do, that you do revisit yourself all
Absolutely,
the time.
yeah.
When so many other people will dissipate themselves from their past and keep on doing what they think is moving forward.
Yeah.
But you will pluck ideas, like revisit them with all the skill that you have now,
Absolutely.
with all the resources you have now, and I love seeing those things coming back.
I think it's good. I don't think you have to kill yourself every season. It's always good to look into your archive, and I've got such a rich archive of fittings or toiles that are like, you might pursue it for a season, but it just doesn't feel right, but you're like, you can bank it. And that's always good to have, that little bank, that little storage. Or a clear winner would be, I don't know, like the gaffer tape or the neon. It's always good to bring them back and do them a little bit differently to update them, but people still remember it as your signature.
Lace collection, we're looking at these pictures on the acrylic here.
The life drawing, the lover's lace.
The lover's lace. I feel that you're almost the only designer who actually provokes me in that way. Every time I see a Christopher Kane show, you're talking about the sort of, Louise telling you there's no such thing as bad taste. You manage to go somewhere which is verging on the disturbing, often passing over the verge. Well, to me it feels like you're so doing this for yourself.
I have to love it. I have to feel really good about it. And obviously to put it out in the runway, you have to feel really good about it. I would be crying backstage if it wasn't the case. So you always really feel, like for instance, the lover's lace, it was something we wanted to do. We always want to push lace differently. I've always done lace from the very beginning, from my graduate, and then the lover's lace came about life drawing. I love life drawing, I went to art school, and I hadn't done it in such a long time, so I thought, how can we do lace, not pornographic, but make it just different in body and shapes, and it's really eloping the body and it becomes an orgy, and it became lover's lace. It was my life drawings put into lace motifs that were then over the body.
Would you say you're quite perverse?
I mean, I try not to be, but I think I'm only human. I think I'll always want to look at stuff that I'm not meant to. I'll always look out for things that I'm not meant to look at. And I think everyone does in their own way, but it's only been natural. We are like that science thing again, we are animals, so we do always sort out for things that are wrong and bad, but the good bad, not a dodgy bad.
What draws you lace? Properness of it, the Catholicism.
Yeah, I think, well, that was a big deal in Scotland, especially your first communion. So I was always very envious of people, the girls, because they had the most beautiful, I mean, the first communion dresses are so beautiful. And it was always that white lace, or we had the gala day, and everyone used to dress up. But the girls were always so spoiled for choice because it was lace. But laces just always get so many great, historic references. It can be good or bad. It can be seen as bad taste or good taste, but it just, so many characters in lace, and you can do so many great things with it, and we do.
And also, you can twist it. You can make it perverse, because if you're thinking of communion dresses, they just scream out to be defiled,
absolutely,
don't they?
Well, exactly, and anything that is Catholic screams out to me.
How do you figure guilt into what you do?
Well, guilt's
what
always
makes you feel bad?
Hangovers, to be honest. But that's quite normal. But I think when you have to work in a hangover,
that's not guilt.
No, but when you have to work in a hangover, you're literally want to kill yourself. But guilt is one of those things where we grew up. My grandmother was very she was very, very Catholic. So simple things like you were late or whatever, or you swore, you were made to feel really, really bad about it. And it went on for not 10 minutes, but for hours. You were always given that horrible feeling of being I'm not good enough, or what have I done to disappoint you. But that was your Granny Kane for you. She was seen as that, like everyone loved her, but she was dark in that sense. But
has that stayed with you then?
I think so. I think being Catholic, you speak to other people who are Catholics brought up in Scotland and Ireland, and you're literally, it's instilled in you to feel guilty of any sort of pleasure.
So you still don't feel that you're good enough?
Well, I think
it's quite a good place to be in for somebody who's creative.
I think you always need to try to be the best you can be, but then I don't want to seem as being too cocky, because that's also really bad. Because I hate narcissism and all that. That's also a very Catholic trait. Can't be too, you can't be too vain.
Well, how do other ideas come to you? I'm intrigued by your pile of books on the floor there, because it's quite a random compilation there.
It's literally so many areas it can come from. My archive of pictures, which I've got tons of, I'm always taking pictures. Or it could be an old vintage piece, it could be a piece of fabric, it could be a shape, it could be a sleeve, it could be, I don't know, you just need to keep your eyes and ears open. Now,
I see, of course, at the top of the pile is Hollywood Babylon, and you've always been able to, not always, but in some of your collections, there's always this really interesting Hollywood reference.
Yeah.
Like a sort of, Sunset Boulevard-y style.
Yeah, because like I said, I grew up watching TV and films, and they may have not been the most glamorous films, but I don't know, it was just such a great outlet.
So what you're loving there is Jean Harlow's
little fringe cape, but I don't know, there's just such a dark, twisted thing. Always comes from really random areas, always from film. It's a really strange but such an amazing film, Al Pacino, Cruising. Okay. And it's a really dodgy film, but you know what? The soundtrack is beyond brilliant, and it started off listening to the music and obviously researching the film. Honestly, and then looking at fabrics, and we had the moires a sideline for the season before. We didn't use it, but we thought it's so luxurious, it's so winter, and the colours are just so rich. So we pushed that forward, mixing with metallic threads. The knitwear, I don't know, it was a feeling, it was an instinct, and we just went with it. There's always an element, there's always a theme running through every collection. It may not be so literal, but we like to have within that collection there were so many different key aspects. I think looking back, especially the knitwear, the lilac and the red jumpers with the jeans, the flocked pieces, the purple with the black rose print, very graphic but also very feminine. The moire dresses, the fur pieces. I think it's really hard to pinpoint because we work so hard and there's so much blood, sweat and tears that goes into every garment. You're you either love it or hate it, but every season it gets better, and we love doing what we do, and we love to have really great results. It's so nice to see people actually buying them as well, and obviously when you gift a celebrity it's even better because it's so good as an advertisement that person has chose to wear. I suppose the Duchess of Cambridge who wore something recently at the Olympics which was bespoke but derivative of the spring-summer that we were talking about. People like Emma Stone, Alexa Chung. So it's a variation, Emma Watson, so there's a young to older, Yasmin Le Bon, who's the most recent. So it's always a really nice accolade to everyone who works for us as well, that's what it becomes, that long process, and it becomes that for a moment, which is great. I suppose it's always been a great support here, and I think opening in Edinburgh there was so much hype, and I always remember people saying, oh my god, there's a Harvey Nichols opening, and it's like, oh, and people are like always quoting, they have fab quotes of Adina and Patsy. I mean, they're the most famous references that I can pull, and especially growing up in Scotland and watching Fab. It sounds really cheesy, but it's true. Like no, that was the most plainest.
All our favourite fashion.
And that's when you became accustomed to labels and Harvey Nichols, because it was all about Harvey Nichols. But I think people were just so abuzz, and I think it's such a great success story, and people need luxury in their life and to be instilled with taste and style, and I think Harvey Nichols does a great job now. I started my company literally 4 hours after graduating. It was as fast as that. I was taken to Siena on tour, and it was very nerve-wracking, and I was jittering wreck. From that moment on, it was meeting after meeting, and then all of a sudden we had a business. We started off in a bedroom in Dalston, working and sleeping and eating in the same place. We then relocated next door, and then over time of taking on step by step, floor by floor. I mean, this room for me, I mean, it's not very glamorous. I mean, this is clean. That's what I'd like to say. It's nothing too fancy. I don't really like to be surrounded by a lot of stuff. The stuff that I am surrounded with are quite old. I have the same pencil case, the same utensils from college. The zipper doesn't even work, but I still love having it around. I really wouldn't be here without Tammy, my sister, my business partner, my main collaborator. It's been a fundamental law for me and Tammy that we get things done and we work our little bums off. I'm always drawing. I draw mostly everything. For me, life drawing is something I did when I was the age of 12. So actually to study the body and to have a sister who is a woman, it's really quite important. I used to draw Tammy also. I used to draw my mum half naked most of the time in summer holidays, and she was in her bikini, I'd be drawing her. It just became really natural. I work with a really close team of people that I consider family and friends, and we did a lot of life drawing as a studio. And obviously like a nude body in front of everyone scares the life out of some people, but it's nice as like a bonding. When I design mostly on the mannequin. Having my box of ingredients every season, I always start with different ingredients that can really take me to the point where I can see everything. You can't really be spoiled straight away with a whole reel of amazing samples, but at least you can have that amazing buckle or that lace collar that you can visualise and say, do you know what? I know it's going to be great. As a student, I used to isolate myself all the time. Being surrounded by people, you get distracted, and I come here to basically hide from people sometimes. Hide from choices, hide from the edit, hide from fittings. It's really quite a quiet room when the doors are closed, and I can really relax. And that's how I get the best work.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Wonderful, brilliant Christopher Kane. Rest in peace, Louise Wilson, because sadly she's no longer with us. But she had trained with you and I would say your peer group. Something really, really spectacular happened in British fashion, which I think is a lot to do with her, a lot to do with St Martin's, also I think a lot to do with the BFC.
I think...
But were you all there thinking, we're part of something really, this is really exciting?
Well, I think to just not to generalise it, but I think British art schools in general are really great, amongst like the others at the RCA, London College Fashion, but Central St Martin's was where I wanted to go. But there's other great colleges out there. But Louise was fundamental in making my career, like in how it happened, and obviously working very closely with my sister Tammy. She also did the foundation BA and then the MA also.
Oh, did she?
Well, not really. She did it with me though.
Oh,
in that sense, we worked together. But Louise was, and still will be remembered as this fierce character. But we became really good friends. So it was one of those things. We had a really good relationship from the very beginning. And I remember the interview. I was terrified, because obviously you hear of all these crazy stories, which are true. Some of them are slightly made up and extravagant, but you walk in, and at that point she was smoking, and she had her desk, and it's all got these amazing trophies and all these accolades. You walk in, it was just this smoky, like very film noir. It was like a black and white still, and she was smoking a cigarette.
And when you were at St Martin's, I've always wondered with everyone, how much are you reminded all the time that McQueen was here, Saint Lion was here, John Galliano have trained here? How much is that forced down your throats, or is it just a kind of general?
I was lucky again to say that I've been in the Charing Cross building, and you did feel really special going in there. It was not just I think everyone felt really special in that building. It was such an amazing atmosphere. It just had so much history, not only in fashion but fine art and like architecture. It was a really great college where so many great names studied, so I was very lucky in the sense that you would walk in, you felt really privileged and honoured, so it was a great feeling. And when you walk past that building now, it's quite sad because you have fond memories, but I mean, St Martin's has done so much for the industry, world globally as well as British fashions.
It's amazing. Okay, so you had your graduation show, you then had your first commercial show, which I was at, and I remember being in the room, in the tent, and thinking, this is significantly exciting. All your bandage dresses. I've got lots of questions about that. First of all, how did you get that together? Number two, where are all those dresses now? Are they all archived or are they somewhere really special? Because that was a seminal moment in British fashion. So where are they? And the third question is, somewhere in between that Donatella Versace came into your life, so just explain to us a little bit about that.
So I graduated, and literally 3 hours after the graduation, where I won the Harrods Award, which was amazing, I was introduced to Anna Wintour, and I was literally taken from the backstage of the show to her hotel room at the Connaught. So it was an audience with me, Anna, Sarah Moore, Hamish Bowles, and our daughter B. So I was terrified, literally thrown into the deep end, shaking. So that went really well, and then Anna said, oh, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? And I was basically just very naive, still basically like terrified, as you would be, but she was so nice, and she put me at ease, and she said, calm down, it's great, your work's amazing, blah, 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 I've heard so much about you. And then she introduced me to Donatella. A week later, I was in Milan Fashion Week backstage with Donatella Versace, getting her hair and makeup done. I was actually like, oh my God.
Fantastic.
And then Mario Giustino walks in, so I was this small time boy like this, like, okay, enough. This is too much, I'm having heart palpitations. So then,
but they picked you out for that because Anna likes to support new talent, or
Anna's been one of my such a huge maverick for me. Like she's really helped me from the very beginning, and she's always been a support. I can always call on her for things, and also she helped with the process of the investment, which we can talk about later. But you know, Anna's been pivotal to British fashion as well as other editors. But
I don't think anyone even in the country really understands quite how involved Anna Wintour is in this country and in this country's industry.
She supports youth. It's the future, it's tomorrow's future, so she really understands that. It's a business, and she understands that also, but also you have to be creative and you have to stand out. So she's a huge believer in that.
And then what did you do for Versace? What was your role?
I obviously got offered a job. I turned it down and said I've been offered Topshop New Gen, which was like amazing because they obviously pay for your show, and it was such a great thing to do. So I basically just had to grab it and see. I told Donatella I'd love to work for you, but not in that capacity. Can we do something else? So it became a long consultant. So I did Versace Couture, I did accessories, I did some mainline, and it was back and forward to Milan. So that was basically funding.
Were your peers all doing kind of the same, or was everyone a little bit jealous? I mean, this is a big opportunity for a graduate.
I kept myself to myself. I was very private even at college. I only seen Louise maybe like once every 2 weeks during the process of the MA, because everyone was so competitive. It was not a horrible environment, but I didn't want to be surrounded with other people's work. I don't want to be influenced. And you know how, so I wanted to be in my little shell of a bedroom with the TV playing, just doing what I did, and it was good. So basically after that, I worked at Versace Consulting, and it helped me pay and fund the collection, which we then showed in September in Holland Park, which you went to. Those dresses still do exist. We look at them very often. Those dresses I look at almost every season because they always remind me what is possible with nothing. So it's great.
And I also wanted to talk because Swarovski was a big part of that show. I don't think people really get how much support Swarovski gives to British fashion. Yeah. They're very pivotal for you, not only in the clothes you made, but in the kind of the support that they've given you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when obviously I started out, I got the Topshop New Gen, which is a really amazing thing that they offer young designers. So I was very lucky to get that straight away. And obviously people like Swarovski, the company, and Naj is also very supportive of young talent, and obviously getting the product out there, which is great. So I worked with Swarovski, and it was great. And obviously great product and great working relationship. So all good.
We're just so lucky in this country to have this kind of,
it's very good.
Benefactory. Okay, we're now going to take a look, because fast forward to that, you've now been bought by a huge fashion conglomerate, which we're going to talk about, but you've also just opened your first store in London's Mount Street, and you also have launched this amazing website, and you're very tech savvy, not only in what you design, but in the way that you approach your customer and the way that you represent your work. So just take a little look at a video of the store and the new website. Pure Prep. Okay, so your store, how did that come about, and how does it feel to own a store, and how do you go about actually opening one?
Well, obviously the investment came first.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So Kering basically now owns 51% of Christopher Kane.
Correct. Yeah.
What does that mean for you? How did that come about?
At the point, me and Tammy were obviously doing everything. We were literally doing from admin, emails, putting rubbish out, and the designing the collection literally became the last thing in the agenda. So it became to the point where I was becoming very frustrated. We needed to bring staff in, expertise, knowledge from everywhere else, but we couldn't afford to. So that was one thing that it had to change really before I was at breaking point, and so was Tammy because we worked so close together. So Anna again came to the rescue and introduced me to Francois and other investors. But Francois he really struck a note with me, and we really got on from the very beginning. And he truly believes in being creative and being yourself and to stand out, and also to be in the stable with other great British brands like Stella McCartney and Alexander McQueen. So it just felt really right. And obviously moving on, bringing in new staff, which is really fundamental to grow the business, because we were literally doing everything. It's so hard.
I've been dancing all night. Well, not really, but yeah.
But clearly you've been working
Yes.
all night.
More or less. There's a lot here, as you can see, but it's been over the course of COVID, as you know, and this is more or less what I've been doing my whole time.
So has glitter been part of your
Yeah.
childhood? I mean, that's why I can only imagine that glitter was somewhere inside.
Inside somewhere. I think the first glitter painting was of my mum when I was around 14, and she was like one of my first life drawing models, and she had a cigarette in the gardens. It was a super hot summer, and she was wearing her brand pants, super cool. Yeah, so she was very cabaret, very Bob Fosse in the garden. I was like, Mum, can I paint you? And all I had was a pencil case filled with Pritt stick and glue and those cheap glitter pens. So that's how it started. And the last time I painted my mum was 2014, and that was the last time I painted her, and that was also a glitter painting, which is there.
And this is it here.
Which was using Bonnie's, my niece's, stuff to hand that she was playing with, which also included glitter and glue. So yeah, I just like this. You just don't know what you're going to get with it.
So COVID happens.
Yes.
You go into lockdown, and then what do? You spend a ton of money on art, or what happened?
No, I went through a process of what am I going to do next, or it was fear. I think it was anxiety, fear, and I think we all faced that. I think you must agree yourself, and everyone we know. It was the fear of the unknown, and job is fashion relevant. What am I going to do? How can I be creative? And so I just thought, I'll go on one with a few glasses of wine, as you do. You go on the website, you can't get anything because everything's already sold out, because obviously everyone's budding artists now and fitness freaks. I went on and I literally got, the only thing I could get was actually glitter. And I was like, well, this is quite weird. So I just bought everything, and it was like £2,000, which was literally lasted me a week. Because once I got cracking, it was everywhere, and I just went crazy. And I think it was just the outburst, and I had to get it out, and I didn't know if it was good.
So
or bad.
it was a kind of emotional reaction to COVID,
Yeah.
and a creative one.
Yeah, and it was nice to be in the garden too.
But Christopher, there are so many
Yes.
portraits here. I want to talk about some of these images and what they are.
They're not really based in anyone. It's the spirit of people that I've known growing up, spoiled children, or all girls, because I'm obsessed with obviously the female form and beauty, and they don't take very long, but they're so much fun and spontaneous, and you can go crazy.
But also you have your bigger canvases
Yes.
as well, and they've also actually got beads on them and they. Tell me,
That's
when
one of
did
the
you
first
start
ones.
making these?
The very beginning, that was one of the second. That's the second one that actually got ruined with rainwater. It got left in the rain, like a smoggy morning. It was again the scary thought of painting on for canvas, because I don't want to say I'm an artist or whatever, because I think that I don't really want to be labelling myself. But when you started painting on canvas, it became scary. But then obviously I got so addicted that I went from small to really big.
And let's look at really big.
Yes.
Because really big is this.
Yeah, this is sort of like a mindscape. It's basically just me playing around with colours, and the glitter, and making formations and grid-like.
But you're also using oil paint under here as well.
That's acrylic, which is then I play around with it before it dries. But these are I call them mouths, even though they're very circular.
But this is now a major preoccupation because lockdown happened in March. Have you been painting ever since March?
Yeah, non-stop. So there's that, but there's also more of them in other places, just because the outlet, it just felt right. I didn't want to create clothes. I wanted to do something else, and yeah.
But now you'll find a way to do both.
Absolutely, and I think I'm not going to forget my roots. I love fashion, I love the process, but for me it was the change element and how we have to process that going forward. I don't want to be in this position next year doing thousands of pieces, which is just pointless because it's hardcore out there. The retail environment's really suffering, so no one's there to buy it.
Well, let's look at the way you are going to translate it into clothes.
Absolutely, Kirsty, the way.
Slower.
So this is where we are now, Kirsty.
So this is the progression of the glitter work into
clothing. Very, very, very small collection of clothing, which is inspired directly from the paintings.
Was it always the case that you would manage to turn some of the art into clothing?
It just felt really natural for me. I think it was the only progression we could have went down because I don't want to do a show, I don't want to put anyone at risk, so the idea of like physical garments next to the art, it just looks really good and it makes sense. It's a 360 in a way, which is great.
But this is beautiful. What is this?
So this is like a Duchess satin, which has been digitally printed from the painting. We even have Tyvek fabric, which is sort of like reminiscent of the postal dresses of the 1960s, which I hand painted. Also the glitter.
Is it all hand painted?
Not all, but the glitter on top has been applied by myself. So it's kind of like, I really loved the simple shapes, keeping it really effortless because it's all about the colours and the art and the textures. It was a nice project to do because I didn't have this concept of big, grand scale productions of shows or collections because I just don't feel it's appropriate.
And it would have been impossible to do a fashion show like you would normally do a fashion show. But these are works of art, so
Thank you.
So you presumably have to decide whether or not eventually they'll form the basis of a collection, or there'll be elements of them that will form the basis of a collection.
I think that's the road that I want to go down with me and Tammy. Like, we always collaborate with ourselves in some weird way, but this is a direct collaboration with myself. I haven't worked with anyone. I didn't see Tammy for 6 months.
So how was she seeing what you were doing?
I was sending little snapshots and obviously, and thank God for phones. Yeah, it was like that, Zoom calls, but you didn't really see the gravity of all how the colours, the glitter, the textures. So yeah, I think she got a real shock when she saw the amount that I had amassed.
You've talked in the past about the influence of Louise Wilson at Central St Martin's.
We were very close, which was great. Teacher's pet. Everyone else hated the idea of me being the teacher's pet, but I loved it. Because Louise, as you know, was a character. She was the biggest brat you could ever imagine.
In a way, he gave you the permission to do anything you wanted.
Louise is so brutally honest and she really gives you a true impression of what the real outside world is like in fashion. It's cutthroat. So the idea of taste, we always felt judged as outsiders, me and Tammy moving from Scotland, so she was like, taste doesn't come into it, it's just different. Good or bad, doesn't care. Who gives a fuck? That's what she'd say. She used to say fuck all the time.
And she was Scottish.
Absolutely.
But she understood that idea that there was certainly coming from Scotland, sometimes somehow it was feeling you weren't as good as other people.
But it's always, I think it's just the way we were brought up and the humblest part of, it was a steel town. It was it was just a great place to grow up and we were so lucky, but we were surrounded by people who weren't so lucky and they always had that on our shoulders, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it did make us feel different. And the whole idea of outsider, again, like outsider art has always been even just the idea of that, like people who are just so untouched by the outside world, but it's the raw emotion that they put on the canvas, and they don't have a clue who anyone is, but it's just this rawness inside them. It's very it's just groundbreaking in my eyes.
But when you think of the people that have influenced all of this, who would that be?
Fundamentally my mum, because me and her were together all the time growing up. I used to draw her, like I mentioned. But then the strong women in my life, like Tammy, Sandra, my Auntie Mary, these amazing women who are still here today, thank God. And then obviously people who, even like the Sarah Mowers from American Vogue, she really helped launch me. And she introduced me to Anna Wintour, like literally 2 hours after my graduation in Miami. So these are the things that I had to I couldn't believe that were happening, because you're literally meeting rock stars like Anna Wintour and Donatella a week later. I was like, this isn't real, this is bullshit, this can't be happening to me. But that was the thing that Louise instilled, that we were good enough, which was good. Which I think is so important today for kids especially, that you don't get that enough. And I think the reality we live in, you should be encouraging kids to do anything they want, because it can become
Right now.
We need it more than we're sure.
So in amongst the abstracts and also the brats,
Yeah.
you've got family portraits and you obviously you paint yourself and you paint your nieces. But was that part of being with them during lockdown when you couldn't be?
I suppose so. It was sort of like a nod to them because I couldn't be with them, but also I got really bored with making so much mess, if I'm really honest. I just thought, you know what, I'll have a day off and just focus on faces or portraits that are more real. But yeah, I suppose when you look back, it was like missing them, because I was really missing them. The contact is so important, especially growing up with young kids. They really do inspire you how radical they can be, and they too are so radical.
So you also, in your own portrait, look incredibly
Young.
pensive, but very direct. You're looking at directly.
Direct, and again, I mentioned I did a lot of in the garden. Most of these, actually, the ones like this were done at night, because days went into night. You just were working the whole day, and as you know, we were locked down. You just didn't know what day it was or what time it was. So I was just so into it that, yeah, like they just rolled out. And
Did you find some kind of superhuman energy at this time? Seriously?
yeah, and I think some wine helped, and yeah, that definitely helped. Not going to lie, like it was nice to have time to yourself, and yeah, I didn't have my phone. It was just time for me, and it was great.